Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel, Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, and also to help you deepen in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who are here to infuse love upon your path. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, which are so wonderful. It's a beautiful way to deepen in your divine guidance. And if you're ever interested in scheduling a session, you can just mosey on over to my website, illuminatingsouls.com, where you'll find information about my angel sessions, as well as soul mentoring and my classes and circles that I facilitate. Truly, it will be a blessing to connect with you in your waking hours. And I am someone who uses sleep podcasts to help me transition from the waking hours into the beautiful expanse of sleep. And I love sleep podcasts so much that I was guided to create this for you. My hope is, after you've had a chance to listen a few times, that this podcast can serve as an oasis of light for you. It can become a place where you can plug in to waves of love for you. I know I'm not the only one feeling the chaos we are moving through in the collective, and so I want this episode to be a love letter for you, because I believe in you and I am so deeply grateful for the gift of you. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and release, and get ready to cozy on up, whatever that means for you. For me, I plump up all my pillows plural, because I sleep with a lot of them. I think I have a little bit of a princess and a pea thing going on. I love lots of blankets and lots of pillows. And then I put in my earbuds and I pick a podcast episode and I turn the volume down low and I listen until I drift off. So this is your time to get ready. And the flow of this episode is going to be that we will chat for a little bit. Well, I'll chat, you'll listen. Although feel free to have a mental conversation with me. And if you have any feedback or any response to anything I'm saying, you feel free to reach out and send me a message, as I would love to hear from you. But right now, I really encourage you to get ready for bed. You can chat with me later. But for right now, this is your time. This is your time to come into sanctuary for rest. So we'll talk for a little while, and then I'll call in the angels and they will amplify their loving presence for you. And then I'll read to you. So we're going to get to be together for about the next hour or so. So you'll have plenty of time to drift off. So don't feel pressure. Don't feel like you have to hurry up and sleep. You have plenty of time. And you know what? If it takes more than an hour, this is my 33rd episode. And that means there's approximately 33 hours of content available for this podcast, so you can just let it play all night. And the angels and I will keep you company. And just take a nice deep breath in, allowing the light of the divine to come to you now, breathing in the love that is here for you. And also giving yourself permission to release whatever this day brought you. That you have permission to rest and just be. This is your time to replenish and restore. And I'm going to invite the angels in to be with us. They are already here, but I'm a girl who loves ritual. I love the act of calling them in. There is something so powerful about that request and intention. And almost always when I call them in, I feel them here. And perhaps tonight you will feel them too. And it's okay if you don't. It doesn't mean they're not here. And if you're not someone who feels energy, I invite you to simply imagine. Go into your imagination and visualize the angels with you. The imagination often overlaps with the place where we receive divine guidance. It's not one and the same, but they do share some real estate. So I find that using the imagination as a gateway to angelic connections can really help. So, you take some nice deep breaths in and out. You cozy on up. Let your body relax. And I'll call the angels in. Beautiful angels on high, we invite you to join us here. We ask that you bring forward gentle waves of love in a way that it is calibrated for each of the beloveds who are with us now. And whether you are listening to this episode the week that it's released or listening even years later, the angels will always join you in live time because they are not bound to time and space in the same way we are. So beautiful angels on high, we ask that you bring forward a blanket of love, perfectly calibrated for each of the beloveds that are here. Angels, we ask that you bring forward soothing, nurturing frequencies that help our bodies and minds to relax so that it feels easier to release the day that was and begin to drift off into a lovely expanse of rest and sleep. And beautiful angels, while we rest, please help to clear and heal our energy bodies, our minds, and our physical bodies as well, to help shift our energies so that we feel a deeper sense of well-being. It is so wonderful to be gathered together here in the company of the beautiful angels of light. And here is what the angels want you to know. They say that they are deeply grateful for the gift of you. They say that you have a challenge understanding the depth of loving you bring into this world. But truly the world is brighter because you are here. That within you are gifts and abilities that will inspire the hearts of others. And that you need not feel that you have to become famous or write a best-selling book. You already are a bright light. And you already are bringing more love into this world. They simply invite you in this moment to receive this acknowledgement into your heart. So just breathe with us. And they say, do not doubt your place in this world. Your way is being paved with light. Seek out the blessings that find you. Make space for the inspiration that is carried on a whisper and a breeze. You are traveling this path surrounded with love from your angels and guides, and they are here supporting you. So take a breath in and breathe in the love. You know, we all carry the duality of shadow and light within us. The duality says that we're not enough on some days, and on other days it says that we are too much. It's like some strange puzzle that we can't quite fit into. But you are you. You are the breath of God incarnated as you. And you are more than enough. And you are not too much. You are just the right amount of you. So take a breath and allow yourself to come into alignment with the brightness of your true spirit. One of my favorite affirmations, and it's one that Josephus and the angels love to work with us on, is so simple. It says, I now call forward all that I am. And it's based upon the premise that so often we send parts of ourselves away. We might send away our creativity or our magic because we judge that it's not enough. So when we come into this beautiful affirmation, I now call forward all that I am, it's an invitation to call ourselves back into our innate wholeness. So just take a breath as you're getting ready to drift off to sleep. And give yourself permission to call forward all that you are. I now call forward all that I am. I call forward my magic and my gifts and my abilities. And angels, while I sleep, I ask that you infuse me with inspiration and light to make it easier for me to walk upon my authentic path. And dear ones, just take a breath. Just breathe. I affirm you are blossoming open into a beautiful expression of even more of all that you are. Thank you for the brilliance of your light and the depth of your heart. We are so deeply grateful for the gift of you. So you just allow your body to relax and receive the clearing and healing light from the angels while you sleep. And while you rest, the angels will watch over you. And I say a prayer that your dreams be sweet and you awaken in the morning or whenever it is you're supposed to wake up feeling replenished and refreshed and even more connected with your inspired heart. So you drift off. And while you do, I'm going to tell you a story. When I initially started recording this episode, I was planning on diving into another installment of the book, A Little Princess, by Frances Hodgson Burnett. The last time I read this book to you was episode 18 back in January. And A Little Princess was one of my very favorite books growing up. And while I was reading it for this episode, it occurred to me how sad this book is. And growing up, I did not experience this as a sad book. So I recorded, about a half an hour of reading the next chapter of the book, and I thought, I don't think I want to send this to you. I don't think this is helpful material for drifting off to sleep. And we are going to return to that book, but I'm going to skip forward to some of the more magical and serendipitous parts of the book that I think are what helped make this so enchanting for me as a kid. But it got me contemplating about how so many of the books that I read growing up were kind of sad, but I did not experience them as sad. And I don't think other children did either. I don't think these were books that caused us to feel sorrowful. I think it must have to do something with our psychology in those age stages, right? Where we have this fierce sense of independence and seeing the world through our eyes. So I thought I would just wax poetic about some of my favorite books growing up and share with you a little bit about them, because my sense is you may have read some of these too. And then, I don't know if it'll be this episode or the next one, we will return to A Little Princess. So she will come back. So the first book I'm going to share about, and I can't read these books to you because they are not in public domain. They are still copyrighted, which of course they should be. So this first book was published in 1967. And I'm going to read to you the first line of the book because it's a very iconic first line and it might bring it back to you. This is what it starts off with. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a Ride Home. So I'm going to give you a moment. I'll read it to you again. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a Ride Home. Well, I won't make you guess, because actually you're hopefully drifting off to sleep, so I don't want to wake your mind up too much. It is the opening line from the book The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Now, to say that I loved this book would be an understatement. I was in relationship with this book. I don't remember how old I was when I read it, but if it was published in 1967, I would have been 5 years old. And I'm assuming I probably got this out of one of those Scholastic Fair book sales that we used to have at school. And this is how I seem to remember my age stage when I read the book. So, if you don't know what this book is, I will share with you the synopsis. There are 3 brothers: Pony Boy, yes, that's his name; Soda Pop, and that's his name; and Daryl. I don't know why Daryl gets a regular name, and then there's Soda Pop and Pony Boy, but that's part of the charm of this book. Daryl is 22 or 23. Soda Pop is 16. And Pony Boy is 13 years old. Tragically, their parents were killed in a car accident. And to keep them from going into foster care, to keep the brothers from being broken up, Daryl decides that he is going to take responsibility for raising his 2 younger brothers. They have a very hard Scrabble life, and the book is really all about their friends and the social difficulties there are between the greaser, they're considered the greasers, and the socias, who are the upper class kids at their schools, and there's a lot of darkness in this book, and kind of, there's not the romance of West Side Story, but kind of, West Side Story-ish, the 2 rival groups. Actually, you know what? I'm going to read to you the synopsis of the book from the inside of the flap of the book. I don't think I can get in trouble for reading that part to you. The Outsiders are a rough and swinging gang of long-haired teenagers from the wrong side of the tracks. They have little hope for the Mustangs and Madras shirts and all the rest of the material pleasures of the American life. Their mode of expression is violence, directed toward the group of privileged kids who are at once objects of their envy and their hatred. This is their story, and especially the story of Pony Boy, tough and sensitive, whose inner conflicts and fierce drives shape a moving novel of young people trying to find their place in a world they never made. And the book was written by S.E. Hinton when she was 17 years old, right? So she really understood the psyche of those age stages. So this book lived in me. It lived in me. These characters were a part of my inner landscape. And here's one of the things I find so fascinating about my relationship to the book. I must have read this book for the first time when I was about 11 or 12 years old. Because this is what I recall. In the book, Pony Boy is 13 years old. And I remember thinking, why are they treating him like a kid? He's 13. So in my mind, he was old enough to make his own decisions, and he was old enough to go on his adventures and take on life and be the the driver of his destiny kind of thing. So to me, that reflects what I was thinking around 11 or 12 years old, that 13 was old, it was mature. Of course it is, right? And I've read this book, it must be at least 100 times, but I remember reading it again at some point when I was 16 years old, which is how old Soda Pop is. And again, I remember thinking Soda Pop was old and mature and Ponyboy was just a kid. Like, what did he know? Of course they needed to take care of him. And then at some point in my 20s, I picked the book up again for nostalgia. And I was horrified. I was like, oh my God, they're so young. Ponyboy is so young to be going through all of this. And poor Soda Pop, he's young. And then again, at some point, I watched the movie because if you haven't connected the dots yet, this became a very famous movie that Francis Ford Coppola made, and it's with C. Thomas Howell. It was like all the young actors of the time. C. Thomas Howell, Patrick Swayze, Rob Lowe, Tom Cruise, Emilio Estevez, Ralph Macchio. I don't know. Did I just say his name right? Is it Macchio? Macchio, I think. I'm sorry, whatever, if I'm mispronouncing your name. And certainly as an adult, I read this book or watch this story, and I have such profound empathy in my heart because here's Derry, this 22-year-old kid trying to keep his brothers from harm. So I'm always fascinated with my relationship with this book because of how I perceived it through my different age stages. And I will also say, I don't know how it was for you when you were 11 or 12 years old, but I had a lot of crushes, right? Crushes became, the source of fantasy and love, the future visions for love. And, who didn't want the bad boy then, right? The boy who was in pain that we were going to heal and fix. Future signs of a light worker for sure. Oh, he's so troubled. I'm going to make him better. I'm going to be the light in his darkness. All of those, totally earth angel, incarnated angel, light worker 101 material. And I bring this up because the early editions of The Outsiders had an artist's rendering of the boys. And there's one boy with this dark black hair who I assumed to be Soda Pop. I don't know if it was, but to me, in my mind, he lived as Soda Pop. And I had this mad crush on him. So he's just an artist rendering on the cover of a book. But to me, he was the ultimate cute boy. And later, when actors were brought in to play the role, and Rob Lowe was cast as Soda Pop, and Rob Lowe's a cute guy, right? No shade on Rob Lowe. I love him. But he wasn't my Soda Pop. And I had a very difficult time with that because the Soda Pop that I had imagined from the book cover dwelled within me. And now to go and buy the book again, it's the artwork from the movie. And at some point I lost this book, my original Outsiders book. And I actually went on eBay at some point to buy a copy with the old cover for nostalgia's sake. So as I talk to you about this, I am looking at my cover of The Outsiders with the cute boy with the dark hair, who I loved through much of my adolescence. God bless our fantasies and crushes and imaginations when we were younger. I don't know who your adolescent crush was, but this was one of mine. I really did live in this book. And I love that part of the imagination, especially growing up, that we get to expand our awareness of who we are and where we are and co-create in a way. It trained me well for what I do now, I suppose. So the first book I share with you is The Outsiders, and how I did not experience this as a super sad book. I mean, there are absolutely sad parts, but now I read it, and the empath in me is like, oh my God, I am so sad for these boys. Why isn't someone taking care of them? And yet that was not my experience at 12 years old. I was like, they got it together. Oh, and one other thing that I loved about these brothers, they always made a chocolate cake for breakfast. I mean, tell me this is not my dream come true. Phenomenally cute boy, troubled, makes chocolate cake for breakfast. Ding, 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 Laurel, Bleadon-Maffei, calling to you from beyond. Chocolate cake, cute boy, trouble, they're going to need you. I was all in. And part of the narrative of the book was that if they didn't have any chocolate cake left in the house, one of them would whip it up so there would be chocolate cake for breakfast. So again, cute boys, chocolate cake, and boys with troubled hearts who I could help love and soothe. Oh, such the phenomenal archetype for my 12-year-old heart. Okay, so that's the first book I want to share with you. The next book is a book you may not have heard of. I don't know how famous this book was. It's certainly not one of the books that everybody talks about now, whereas The Outsiders, I would imagine you have heard of before. If you didn't see the movie, you maybe read the book, or somehow it showed up on your radar. I don't know that this book did, but one of my favorite books, it's called From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. And maybe it's Basil, I don't know. But in my mind it was Basil, because I was a kid growing up in Skokie. So that's how it lived in me. So again, I may be mispronouncing the name, but to me it's From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. And it is written and illustrated by E.L. Konisberg. Again, I hope I am pronouncing the name right. Again, I think this is one of those books I probably got from one of the Scholastic book sales. I know it won a lot of awards back then. So maybe you read it, I don't know. So Claudia and Jamie, I think, are about 12 and 8 years old. They're young. Claudia's the older sister. And they have had it with their parents. They are feeling unappreciated. And they feel as if they're being asked to do too many chores. They've kind of had it. And so they decide they're going to run away. Again, not a dark story. These kids were not being abused, but at that age stage, right, 8 and 12, at some point, we get fed up with the rules and whatever else is going on in life. I'm going to run away. I'm going to run away. I need to be on my own. If that ever was something you experienced, again, not based in any darkness, just more based in average kiddom, right? Average kid stuff. So their school class is going on a field trip to the Metropolitan Museum of New York, and they have it all figured out. The field trip happens to coincide with their music day. So they actually leave their instruments at home, and they put clothes into their music instruments. And when they get to the museum, they hide their music cases somewhere, and they arrange to stay behind so they don't get back on the bus with their class, and they stay behind in the museum. And this is where the adventure begins. So now it's nighttime, and they're alone in the museum. They have to be alone in the museum for this story to work, right? So I don't know where the guards were. I don't think they had, big security measures in place back then. And they hide their music cases like in the sarcophagus, and they bathe in the fountain, and they get loose change from the fountain because people would throw coins into the fountain, and so they would get change from the fountain, but not too much. And let me start at night. So at night they would find a bed to sleep in because there was different kinds of antique furniture in the museum. And then they would make the bed up before anyone got in the morning. And then during the daytime, they would join one of the other school groups and learn more. And for their meals, because they had all of this change from the fountain, they would go to the automat, which is where you put coins in and then you would get food back out in New York. So everything about this book enchanted me as a kid, right? It's like, of course they want to go on their own adventure, and what kid didn't want to be alone with full run of the museum on your own? You'd take good care of stuff. Like, you could sleep in the antique bed and it would be okay. You'd take good care of it. And of course you can bathe in the fountain and you'd brush your teeth. Of course you would take good care of yourself. Why were people treating you like such a kid? What a cool adventure. And then they find this beautiful statue of an angel. Again, no foreshadowing about my life at all, right? There's this beautiful angel, and there's this controversy about whether or not this is a statue that Michelangelo carved. And the statue was donated by Mrs. Basil Lee Frankweiler. So this is the mystery part of the book. So the kids decide that they have to figure out this mystery. And they wind up trying to meet Mrs. Basil Lee Frankweiler, which they do, to help discover the origins of this statue. So I'm not going to spoil the book for you. Clearly, they figure things out. It has a happy ending. They go back home. And the book doesn't really deal with how terrified their parents must have been or that the police were looking for them. It just kind of glosses over that because this is really a child's fantasy and not at all based in reality. So again, I think it's so interesting. My perspective of this book was that it was totally cool that the kids did this. Like, what a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? But I didn't necessarily want to put my parents through that, I guess. I mean, not that I would have ever really thought of doing that myself, but as a kid, I thought that was super cool. What a great idea. I don't know that I would have wanted to go to a regular museum, like with furniture and sarcophaguses and paintings. I don't know that I would have loved that. I think I would have loved to have gone to the zoo, right? Like have my version of Mrs. Basil Lee Frankweiler, but at the zoo, I would have loved. Or the Field Museum in Chicago, where they have all the dinosaur skeletons and mammoths and things like that. I thought that was really cool. So I could totally vision my version of this. I wouldn't have wanted to do it alone. I would have definitely wanted to have an accomplice. But I also couldn't imagine doing this with either my brother or sister. So that part of the book I couldn't interject myself into. But I loved the idea of taking a bath in a fountain and then getting change for snacks. Is that not awesome? Like, okay, I'm going to take my bath in the fountain when the museum is closed. I'm going to fill my pockets with change. And then I'm going to go get snacks. And there's an angel statue, which at the time I did not think was special. But I love looking back and going, oh, and the angel was there. Now, of course, the Laurel that I am, I care deeply about the angel. So that's my second book. That was one of my favorites. And then I had an absolute love affair, probably like all of you did, with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah, who did not love that book? And the Oompa Loompas and the Chocolate River. And when the movie was made, I was really disappointed, because a book like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, especially for those of us who read it before seeing the movie, the wonderful thing about those kinds of books is they dwell in our imagination. There were a few artist renderings in the book, but that didn't necessarily build the visual experience of the book for me. Like, that book lived in me. And little Charlie Bucket, who again, in my mind, wasn't too young. So again, I must have read that at a time when he didn't seem so young to me. And just the idea of being in the chocolate factory, was that not the most awesome thing ever? And I'm thinking that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory may have been the first non-picture book I ever read on my own. I seem to recall that the teacher, and this must have been first or second grade, somewhere around there, I think. Kids, when I grew up, we didn't read as young as kids do now. I mean, I remember kindergarten for us was macaroni dioramas, right? Paste 5 pieces of macaroni on your piece of cardboard. I think it was only at the end of kindergarten that we started learning the alphabet. So I don't know that I started reading non-picture books before I was in second grade, maybe. And I seem to recall that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was one of my first, if not the first, non-picture book that I read. And I was so proud of myself for reading a book without pictures. It was like a grown-up book. And then I read every book that I loved 1,000 times, right? Again, if you listened to the episode about the 1970s television schedule, we didn't have a lot of TV to watch back then. You read a book, you played, you did your thing, but it wasn't about getting constant visual stimulus like we do now. So our imaginations were where we dwelled a lot of the time. So just like The Outsiders, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory dwelled within me for a long, long time. And then in the same breath, I have to say the same thing with Charlotte's Web. I loved Charlotte's Web. And everything about that book I loved. And that book lived inside of me too. I don't have as many clear memories about that book other than it was definitely in heavy rotation in the books that I loved. I remember when the movie was made, it was animated as I recall, and I liked it. I don't remember it being the most awesome movie ever, but I didn't mind it, I seem to remember. And then, of course, there was James and the Giant Peach and Stuart Little. All of those books of the same era. And there was some book, I can't remember, I think it might have been called The Littles. Does anybody else remember this book about tiny little people with tails who lived in the walls of a house? So, like mice might, but they were people with tails. And they would use a spool of thread for a table. I think it was a whole series of books, again, brought to us by the friendly Scholastic book sale. And I remember loving those books. I think it was called The Littles. I don't know if anybody remembers. Feel free to email me and let me know. My hope is you're actually not awake right now listening to any of my rambles. I'm hoping this is dull and rambly enough that you can sleep through it. But if you're up, hopefully I'm amusing you. I'm keeping myself amused for sure. Other books that I loved as a kid, I was certainly heart and soul into Little House on the Prairie books. And this was before the TV series. I didn't have much of a relationship with the TV series. I mean, I watched it, but again, I had read all of those books dozens of times before it became the TV series, and so it really lived inside of me. In fact, I still have my book set of the Little House on the Prairie books. I had a really graceful childhood, I guess I'll say. You know, it's interesting when I go back and think about all of these books where there are absent parents or parents who have passed away and the tragedy of it. That never troubled me, and I don't know if that's because I had a really stable childhood. My parents stayed married. We lived in the same house. They had the same house for 60 years. So I never knew my life without my parents or my parents' house. And old books from childhood were still in the attic or in the closet, and so I've gotten to keep some of my memories from those times. So I do have my original Little House on the Prairie book set that I would sit and read through time and time and time again. And it's so interesting, the moments that stick out, how one winter they had to make bricks out of hay and how they had to wind them up and compress them because they didn't have wood. You know, all of these rustic survival skills that I would never be able to do myself because I am definitely, a fluffy bed kind of girl. But I remember thinking, oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. That if there's an emergency, we can take straw and bundle it up and burn it. Not that we had any straw and not that we had a fireplace, but I felt kind of proud that I knew these survival skills, which of course would never help me now. I am far too soft. I mean, I get too hot and too cold too easily. I can't imagine living through those times. But I just loved those books, the Little House on the Prairie books. And there was another set of books, and I don't remember the name of them. It was about a Jewish family, because, we had to get some Judaism in there. And they were all daughters. And there was this one book, or maybe it's a chapter in the book, about how the mama had made soup for lunch. And the little girl didn't want to eat the soup. She says, no, I want something else. And the mama and the papa said, if you don't eat the soup, you can't have anything else. And it became this battle of wills. So the soup remained on the table through dinner, through the evening, and it became this congealed mess. And the papa said to the daughter, please just take one spoonful and this will be over. And finally the little girl acquiesces and takes a sip of soup, and everyone rejoiced, and then she got to have some food. And now that I think about that, that's really kind of sad. I don't know why, but that scene stays out probably because it's food-based. No one was going to keep me from a meal. Are you kidding? They weren't going to let her eat? That upset me. Not the absent parents, not the kids running away, but that this little girl couldn't eat what she wanted. That broke my heart. I was a little girl who had my priorities straight. That scene, that chapter sticks in my mind. How horrible it was that they made her take a sip of this greasy, congealed soup before she could eat something that she wanted. The horror of it. So I love this opportunity, my friends, to go into the Wayback Machine and feel into some of these experiences. I'm fascinated by our inner worlds. We all have one. It's a sacred garden of consciousness that dwells within us, and it's intensely private. We only share a very small percentage of our inner landscape. And for me, as I look back to the books of my childhood, it tells me and reminds me of how I was in consciousness back then. What my world was like, how I contemplated life and relationships and my place in the world. And so my hope is this is an invitation for you to begin to contemplate some of the early relationships you had with books as a kid. So we are going to make it back to Little Princess. I'm going to skip through the sadder parts and fast forward us to parts of the book that I found most enchanting growing up. And so that is something we can look forward to together. But in the meanwhile, as you sleep, allow yourself to go into your Wayback Machine, into the books that you loved growing up. You know, I always had a stack of books by my bed. They would be on the floor. And I'll give you a little funny childhood memory. I shared a room with my sister. I was messy. I was a slob, I'll say that, as a kid. And my sister was neat. We were Felix and Oscar from The Odd Couple. And my books would just be strewn about the floor. And I would wake up and my sister would have stacked them from biggest to smallest by my bed. And I think at this point in life, oh my God, God bless her, how hard that must have been for her to share a room with me who was so disordered back then that she had to wait until I was asleep so she could neaten up my book pile. And I have to say, I loved that my books were neat at that point. That was awesome. But I never felt inclined to do that myself. So a shout out to my sister, who's amazing and who I love dearly, and that we survived sharing a room for so long. And to, you know, if you had to share rooms with your siblings as well, and however that was for you. We did okay. We did. There's lots of good memories about sharing our room too. That was just one that had to do with books of childhood. So yeah, I always had a stack of books by my bed that at some point would be ordered by my sister. And I should say that librarians run in our family. Both of my aunts were librarians, so we grew up with a great love affair of books. My parents always loved books, and there would always be a used book sale once a year, the Brandeis book sale that was for Brandeis University, and it was in a big tent in the parking lot of the Old Orchard shopping center. And my parents loved that. They would go and find old books, and they definitely passed on their love of books to us. So I am delighted to get to share my love of these books with you. At some point I'll do an episode of books that changed my life forever, but these were just the books of childhood that dwell within me and bring me a sense of warmth and continuity through my life. And so, thank you for letting me share this with you. You have a sweet, sweet night's rest. I hope you're asleep already, and if you're not, you can queue up another episode and I'll continue to ramble with you and bring in the angels and keep you company through the night. I love you very much. You are precious in this world, and I am profoundly grateful for the gift of you. Thank you and blessings to you.